This is Scotte Burns.
And this is Toni Burns.
Coming to you from the crooked little house in Deadwood, South Dakota.
This episode of Love in America is all about women. Yay! For Women's History Month.
Women are good.
Women are good. I think so.
My mom was a woman.
One. Yeah.
She still is.
So am I.
I know. See? Proved my case.
Well, now I got to skip back to speaking of history. Take a walk with me as we journey back to 1888 Deadwood.
Oh, I love those bits. Cue the harp glissando.
We're going to stroll down wooden sidewalks, buy fresh produce, seek lodging at a variety of hotels, and take in a lively performance at the Gem Theater. Yes, Swearingen is still in town.
All of which sounds like a delightful time. And then?
If you feel poorly, we can head over to Deadwood's first female doctor.
No kidding.
Dr. Flora Hayward Stanford. She came to Deadwood in 1888 with her daughter Emma, but she was originally from Pennsylvania. She was married to a successful brick manufacturer, had 2 young children, and a career as a teacher.
Oh, so she was on a pretty normal track for the 1880s, you know?
Exactly. But somehow, for some reason, at the age of 37, she decided to become a doctor.
Good for her. Kind of a tough time to decide to do that.
I was just going to say that. It's not an occupation that was openly welcome to women. Even the AMA president argued that women, okay, ready, ladies, hold on to your chairs because this is going to make you scream. Women are morally unfit to be physicians, claiming them to be ignorant, inexact, untrustworthy, a whole bunch of other really nasty things, and contemptuous of logic.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that special?
Well, undeterred, Dr. Stanford did complete her studies and created a thriving practice in Washington, D.C. And that's where she came from with her daughter Emma to Deadwood, and she did so because of the climate.
She left Mr. Bricks behind and came out to start a new life.
She actually left Mr. Bricks and their son Victor, who decided to stay with Mr. Bricks. But Emma was diagnosed with consumption.
Oh.
What is it? Tuberculosis. Right. And Flora thought that the fresh mountain air and dry climate would be beneficial.
Yeah, it was a common thought at the time.
Very common. Unfortunately, it wasn't completely correct.
No, but the scenery's still nice.
Scenery's lovely. Well, even though Deadwood had started to become, quote unquote, more civilized, it still had its Wild West moments. And she shared one of those in a letter to her son, Victor.
A nameless man burst into the office, badly shot up. I removed 3 bullets from his body, dressed his wounds, and permitted him to leave via the rear door of my office.
Yeah. Well, a few moments later, the sheriff arrived.
Okay.
And said, excuse me, there's a notorious gunfighter I just shot. Have you seen the man? She's just like pointing to the back door.
Did she have to chase him down to pay the bill?
No. I'm thinking she's a smart woman. She probably had him pay in advance.
What if that was Bullock, 1881, the sheriff here at the time?
It might have been. It very well could have been. Well, the town still, it was a Wild West town in many ways, and it was still dominated by men and misogynistic attitudes. Despite all this, Flora flourished. She managed to balance what was then considered a masculine profession with her personal life as a woman. She was involved with all kinds of groups and guilds. She was always willing to lend a hand. She was also a huge proponent of the women's suffrage movement.
Makes sense.
I thought it was really interesting. Well, on top of her regular practice, she had a free dispensary at her office to benefit women who were unable to pay for medical services.
Outstanding.
So this woman treated both the Deadwood gentry and the Deadwood less fortunate and prostitutes.
Wow, she was way ahead of her time. She was busy being a human being.
She was busy being a human being when it was all about class and everything else. Well, she left Deadwood for a very, very brief time to take Emma to Southern California because Emma's health continued to fail. She made it less than a month in California and Emma passed away. Well, grieving and alone, she returned to the place she considered home.
Deadwood?
Yes.
Welcome home, Flora.
Welcome home, Flora. Well, she continued her practice. She expanded it to Sundance, Wyoming. She created a homestead and an office there. Now, keep in mind, Sundance and Deadwood are roughly about 50 miles apart. That meant she traveled between the two on horseback to deal with her patients. And she continued to do this until 1901 when she passed away. Heart failure.
Flora rocks.
Flora totally rocks. She was so well loved that I found a Deadwood Pioneer Times article that was published like a day or two after her death. And it says, she's taken a lively interest in public affairs, has been prominent in the work of churches and society, and her name has been associated in one way or another with almost every laudable enterprise in the city. I wanted to close this on a last letter that she wrote to her son, which gives me a quote I'm going to put up on my computer now. Mm-hmm. Let every moment as it flies record thee good as well as wise. They who improve life's shortest day will not regret its parting ray.
It's beautiful.
I love this woman.
Well,
speaking of love
and women, we're going to give you a few other women to love in honor of National Women's History Month.
Yay!
Starting with some ladies that are making history on a small scale in Albemarle, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. The staff of the Minnow Pond Restaurant and Bait and Tackle Shop.
Oh my God, I love those ladies. I love those ladies.
Because his history starts in the heart, and theirs were enormous. We're going to take you from there to some other pioneer history and the story of Annie Oakley.
Oh, and
Shootist Annie Oakley and her husband,
Frank Butler,
who never got enough credit for being really an early feminist.
He really was.
When you hear Frank's story, I think he'll counteract that whole AMA guy.
Good. I bet he could shoot him.
And our narrative, Tale from the Heart of America, this week is going to be a tale about Toni. Taken from the road a couple of years ago, and an encounter with, shall we say, the less enlightened of the male population. And,
misogynistic.
In the motorcycle crowd, and a story called Motor Maids and Bubblegum.
All this coming up on
Love in America. We're going to take you on a little jaunt through the Carolinas to an encounter that we had outside of Charlotte, working, of course, the southern part of the United States, and rode through Charlotte to, pardon me if I mispronounce the name, Albemarle, North Carolina, far enough outside Charlotte that there was now no longer places for gas or food.
Ever.
And we're debating whether or not to turn around and go find something or keep going and trust to our luck.
Yep. And then we saw a beacon of hope that was closed. So the place was called
the Minnow Pond Bait Tackle Restaurant.
Yeah, we went up. It said it was closed at 2:00 and it was 2:05. And I looked in the side and the door was locked, and we must have looked really pathetic under their shade of their awning, digging for what water we had in our saddle bags.
I think it was as you were pawing at the glass door.
No, honest, we were getting back on our bikes, and then this cute little thing opened the door and said, "Y'all need something to eat?" We're going, yes!
So the ladies at the Minnow Pond were gracious enough. It was Megan, Patricia, Elaine, and Kathy.
Yes.
In their matching Minnow Pond t-shirts.
It was pretty cute. And there was such a wonderful variety of age and relationship status. We had everything from young single Megan to the other end of the spectrum, who's Kathy, grown kids, married for 30 plus years. And then in the middle, we had a single mom with a young son and a single woman, Elaine, and they were right around the same age. So I'd say, 30s, 40s maybe.
So getting different perspectives in ages and experience in the same area. Was really interesting. Kathy in particular had a really cogent observation on how she has made a marriage of 32 years work between her and her husband.
What makes it work? He has a car, I have a car, I go and come when I get ready, so to see.
That seems like that would make sure we're rolling. That's good.
Yeah,
make sure we're rolling.
Apparently, that's the secret to happiness right there. But in a different take on what you think is going to make it work from the other end of the spectrum, from Megan, who hasn't had those 32 years yet, and what she thought she was looking for in a man.
I must say, honest, sweet, and humor is a big, big part. As long as we can get along and have a good time, we're going to go together, I think.
that kind of summed Megan up, actually. She was sweet and she was honest and very open. So what she's looking for in a man, I think, is what she's already gotten herself. But
apparently, Kathy found one of the last of the eligible bachelors out there from what everybody
from
was
what
saying.
they're sounding, yeah, from what they're saying. Well, I don't know if it's so much eligible bachelor as much as grown up. Because that was a recurring theme.
Well,
They don't want to work.
Guys are not mature nowadays.
That's right.
They're very immature.
A lot of them around here, they don't work, or either they're on drugs.
You know, and it's interesting because it's a recurring theme in America today. I've been reading several articles, you know, especially in light of recent unfortunate events, because many of the school shootings are done by young men.
Young men.
And so there's, you know, major interest right now in the state of men in America. And the ladies had some interesting comments about what they thought the maturity level was of men in that neck of the woods.
It's totally different than what it was when I was 16 years old.
Why do you think that is? What makes it different now?
People's just, they want to use me for, my money. They don't want to help. It's just...
Mooching.
Yeah, mooching, yeah. And I have a son to take care of, and I'm not going to take another child in. You know what I'm saying, so far as a man-wise.
Plus, you don't have to fight over the remote control.
That's right. I don't have to cook when I get home after cooking from here.
But so much we keep talking about how this all comes from the perspective of a fairly small town. And just living in a small town now and having family in the Midwest from small towns, I thought it was really funny when we started asking about the best pickup line.
Oh.
And and Megan started out simply saying,
One man comes in here and y'all know Charlie.
Oh, yeah.
and then she went on to give his infamous pickup line.
You know what looked good on you? And I'll say, what, Charlie? He'll say, me.
Charlie is apparently a prime example of their point on the immaturity of men.
Yeah, what did she say? Older than my grandpa or something? Yeah. But again, back to the small town thing. I love the answer of the perfect date, though, because Megan started it, and I thought it was a really good start.
Sitting by the lake, because me and my boyfriend just did that. We've been having some problems, but Saturday night last week, we just went and sat by the water and just watched the water, and it was just, the best thing you could have done. Don't cost no money. I think that's just romantic, just
Dad and I used to do that when we were young.
It was
But
fun.
it was just,
And after all those prime dates, sitting by the lake and doing the things that you can do in the country, we wanted to ask, well, so how important is it to you that the man that you find this happily ever after thing with, be from here?
Right.
Part of what we're looking at, and the reason we're doing this all over the country, is we're looking at what people in different areas, different cultures think of love and relationships. How important is it to have a fella that's from your area, that's from at least your part of the country? Is that an element at all?
Very important to me.
yeah, very.
Well, it's important to me.
I
I wouldn't care where he was from as long as he'd move here with me.
Right,
I'm not leaving my place.
Right, that's the way I'm kind of thinking, too.
I love where I am. I love Australian accent.
London, I'm telling you what, them London boys, their accent was pretty good. I would take a London one, but he'd have to move here.
I think the Italian stallions are pretty handsome.
Apparently, you don't have to be from there, but you're staying.
Yeah. So anybody in Italy, you need to come visit this little town in North Carolina.
They pack heavy because they're not letting you go.
In fact, there's probably going to be several fighting over you. So,
Yep.
as long as you're mature.
And get a better pickup line than Charlie had.
Oh, God, please.
So the next time you are through Albemarle, North Carolina, and you need either a grilled cheese sandwich or some bait, swing by, say hello to the lovely ladies at the Minipon. And meanwhile, we are going to swing into a quick break, and we will be right back, taking you from Albemarle, North Carolina to the frontier west. The story of shootist Annie Oakley and her husband Frank Butler.
Very cool.
Yes, they were. You should have seen them in their shades.
Love in America is brought to you by you.
Ours is a shared labor of love, existing through the support of patrons like you.
You can help keep the love strong and these podcasts coming through supporting Journeys to Love on Patreon.
That would be www.patreon, that's Patreon, patreon.com/Journeys to Love.
For as little as $1 a month, or up to $20 if you're feeling very generous and loving, you can be a patron of love.
You could be a Demedici of hope.
Demedici?
Patrons.
I like it. But what a great way to say I love you to love.
And we love you too. Thanks for the support. You just go, hello, computer.
Oh, we're going to do
Star
this the
Trek
old-fashioned way.
Star Trek is such a good source for quotes and wisdom.
Yes.
So the love story that we chose this time actually was so appealing that we ended up both choosing.
Right. We like to surprise each other. That's what makes a marriage special.
That's one of the things.
So oftentimes we don't tell the other which love story we're going to do. So I accidentally came across notes that Scotte had after I'd spent 2 or 3 hours researching this particular story and found out that's the one he's doing
Well,
this
because
time.
it was such a good story.
It's a really good story.
We're a little biased because part of the reason we moved to Deadwood and we broadcast from the Crooked Little House is we love Western history. And, we are children of the West. We've been all over the United States, and we appreciate all the cultures that we visited. But we are very much steeped in the history and lifestyle of the West. And so these stories from the pioneer days and from settlement of the West are, and the native peoples here have been really important to us.
Yes.
One of the primary characters in the actual Wild West shows was, you'll recognize the name Annie Oakley.
Annie, get your gun.
Which was not a good representation of her and Frank's life.
No.
Annie was actually born Phoebe Ann Moses. Her family called her Mosey. She was born in Darke County, Ohio in 1860. She was the 6th of 7 children.
Wow.
She was 5 years old when her father died from complications from frostbite.
Yep.
And obviously, Mosey's mom, Annie Oakley's mom, struggled, at
7 kids.
Having 7 kids and a single mom on the frontier was a very, Ohio being as frontier as it was at the time, was a very difficult place to be.
Yes.
So, all the kids tried to pitch in. And at 8 years old, Annie picked up her father's gun, shot her first squirrel, and figured out that it was a way to provide some food and basic income for the family. But it was never enough. And so Annie's mom was forced to put her and all of her siblings into foster care and orphanages. Aww. And she was adopted out briefly by a couple. She herself referred to them as the Wolves.
Ooh.
Because they ostensibly had hired her to be a caregiver for their infant son. And she eventually became basically an indentured servant. She was doing everything on their properties for them. They proved to be abusive. She was attacked by the woman who she referred to as the she-wolf. Was actually made her own way back home and was protected by a family friend when the he-wolf came and tried to take her back.
Right.
And so she moved back into her mother's home as a teenager, immediately picked up Dad's rifle again and went to work. And this time, she got so good at it, she earned enough money that she paid off the $200 mortgage on her mother's home.
Now, you say got so good at it. That wasn't just hunting and shooting. At this point, was she involved in shooting competitions?
Well, she got involved in the competitions after this, shortly afterward as a teenager, but she got so good at it that the local town disqualified her from entering because it wasn't a contest anymore.
It was a slaughter.
Well, it was sound defeat.
Yes, it's a poof.
So, and that's how she ended up traveling to Cincinnati. She had to go farther and farther away from home in order to enter.
So they'd let her do it.
Yeah, find some suckers that hadn't heard of her yet. which is, enter Frank Butler.
Yes, poor guy.
Who was, Frank was not the guy that, if you're familiar with anything about, like the Annie Get Your Gun, or even the earlier stories that have been told about Annie Oakley, Frank was always portrayed as a philanderer, kind of a stiff. He was jealous of his wife. He was insecure.
A little bit of a grifter.
Controlling. None of that couldn't be farther from the truth. Frank didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He didn't gamble. All the accounts from family and friends said he was totally faithful, quite taken with her. Butler was a pretty dashing dude too. He was a 25-year-old Irish immigrant at the time that they met, and was already known as a crack shot, and was a pretty successful vaudeville performer.
Yep.
He was part of a shooting act with a man by the name of Bauman, and they, along with their poodle.
Oh, the poodle?
We always get dogs.
What is it with the dogs?
The poodle's name was George. Bauman and Butler, and George, were in Cincinnati awaiting the start of the touring season when Frank accepted a challenge from some farmers in Fairmount, Ohio, to shoot against a local sharpshooter. We all know who that ended up being.
Right, but wasn't that one of the things he thought was really interesting is even before the competition, he was trying to figure out why everybody was voting against him?
Well, they knew something he didn't.
Or betting against him.
The shooting match actually, sorry to the Humane Society, ASPA, PCA, and PETA, you're going to want to close your ears for this. The targets were live birds.
Oh, okay.
And they got 25 apiece. Frank scored 24 kills.
And how many did Annie score?
Not a single bird escaped her clever eye. And,
you go, Annie.
Frank was not only not upset by the loss, he was very impressed. And quite smitten because as dashing a dude as he was, Annie Oakley was beautiful.
She really was.
She had long, dark hair, beautiful, angelic face.
Yeah, aquiline features. She was very, very
And she had the character to go with it because, her background, her upbringing had made her pretty tough.
Right.
And so she was strong and beautiful, and there are some men that appreciate that in a woman.
And aren't intimidated.
And Frank was one of those guys. So after a fairly quick romance, which was helped by Annie's fondness for the dog.
Oh, no, she fell in love with the dog first.
She did. Frank actually courted Annie by sending her letters and cards signed by George.
Oh, that's hysterical.
The poodle.
I love it.
They were married on June 20th, 1882, and that was 10 days after Annie's 16th birthday.
Wow.
That year, Frank found a new partner by the name of John Graham and formed a new shooting combo called America's Own Rifle Team and Champion All-Around Shots.
Okay, that's a little wordy.
It was, PR
Someone needed to do his marketing.
Yeah. Not going to get that one on Twitter. But one night in Springfield, Ohio, Graham fell suddenly ill. Frank was booked, and he needed a replacement.
Uh-oh.
A crack shot on short notice. Who did he know?
Do tell.
Crowds ended up loving Annie. Yes. She proved to be a brilliant show person, and Graham was on the outs. Annie adopted the stage name Oakley.
Right.
And there's some disagreement over where she got the name from, and she never did tell anybody.
Okay.
I guess a woman has to have her secrets.
Yes.
But there's a nearby town in Ohio called Oakley.
Sometimes simplest is the best.
Could be, just glanced off the map. And so the act turned into Butler and Oakley. She proved to be the draw, and so Frank, realizing where their bread was buttered, he moved into supporting her as the manager, press agent, travel agent, accountant, stage assistant.
Wait, this sounds familiar.
Chief clerk and bottle washer, and totally passed the limelight to Annie, which was a great move.
It was.
Because they, in 1885, joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West.
Wild West, yep.
Toured the U.S. and Europe for almost 16 years, and it was there.
I didn't realize it'd been that long.
Quite a while.
Wow.
Almost 2 decades they worked the circuit.
I did not realize
Traveled all over the world, and that's where Annie met Sitting Bull.
Sitting Bull, yep.
Who was also part of the show. I often wonder when you read a little more about Sitting Bull, and maybe we'll do a feature on him later, if it wasn't kind of an anthropological study on his part.
Right.
Because Sitting Bull was a pretty bright guy.
He was a pretty intelligent
But he also was very impressed and a little smitten with Annie, too. And unofficially adopted her as his granddaughter and gave her the Lakota name Watanya Cecilia. Okay. And my apologies if I'm butchering the pronunciation. The Lakota translator on Google doesn't seem to be operating today. So. But it translates as little sure shot.
And that seemed perfect.
Absolutely perfect. And that was a friendship that lasted both of their lives.
Yes.
Frank, however, was often, even though he had accepted Annie, was often totally disrespected by other men because of it.
Right.
In Britain, while Annie was being wined and dined by the nobility, Frank was usually mistaken for her butler.
Oh.
She received marriage proposals from people that were fans that knew she was already married. The King of Senegal made an offer to Buffalo Bill to buy her. He said that he just wanted her to exterminate tigers that were plaguing his properties.
Winky wink.
Yeah, he probably had more than the tigers in mind.
But Frank took it all in stride.
He did.
Amazing. I mean, very graciously all in stride.
Graciousness is probably a great definition for Frank. He was a pretty rare man for the time.
Yeah.
But to his credit, you have to say, Buffalo Bill had some pluses too, because he didn't sell Annie.
Right, that's true. I'll give him kudos for that. But one of the interesting things I found about their story is that in the 1950s and 60s, the movies that were made, they all portrayed Frank very poorly. And I wonder if the times didn't change a whole lot from the 1800s to the 1950s, where it didn't make sense to the Hollywood people and they didn't think the American public would understand a man.
To have two sentimental characters and one of them in that non-male accepted role.
Exactly. Even though he was a strong, intelligent man, that he couldn't possibly be a normal guy that would be willing to let his wife, be in the limelight. And I thought that was really interesting.
That is. He was a fascinating character. It doesn't get nearly enough credit in the story.
No, he does not.
That's why we're blowing his horn a little bit here. So while they were traveling, they were in Cambridge, Maryland, and Frank adopted another dog. Of course, this is years after George was gone. So they adopted an English setter.
Yes.
And the well-known picture that most people have seen the two of them in features the English setter. The dog's name was Dave.
Mm-hmm. Nice, simple.
Frank named him after a performing friend. And before long, Dave, like it happens with all of us, he kind of became a member of the Butler family. He was their hunting partner and became part of their show. He got so accustomed to shooting and the sounds of the firearms, part of their show was for him. He would sit still while Annie shot an apple off of his head.
Oh, my goodness.
That's a pretty remarkable feat for a dog.
No kidding.
During World War I, when the Butlers were touring army camps, kind of a USO tour to raise money for the Red Cross, Dave became known in the press as Red Cross Dave.
Oh, that is so cool.
And Annie and Frank, the Christmas cards that they sent every year to friends had a picture of him, and it said, with a Santa hat on, and it said, "Hey, Merry Christmas from Dave Butler." Until they retired from Wild West shows in 1913. And they spent the rest of their days just being Mr. and Mrs. Butler.
Yep.
They chased several hobbies. They were philanthropists. They donated to multiple different charities, took long automobile trips together, maybe because they didn't own motorcycles.
Yeah, they would have done motorcycles. They totally would have done motorcycles.
They'd been married for 50 years when Annie died on November 3rd, 1926 from anemia. Frank, the family reports that he didn't seem depressed. He just made a decision that he wanted to join Annie as soon as possible.
Yep.
And so he simply stopped eating.
Yep.
And 18 days later, Frank died on November 21st, 1926. But before he passed, he wrote the following about his beloved Annie Oakley. He said, "Her presence would remind you of an angel in the skies, and you bet I love this little girl with the raindrops in her eyes."
Okay, I hate it when you end with quotes like that, because now I'm going to be snuffling.
Oh, it's all about the writing. But absolutely. It's one of the things that I always taught, the few times that I got to teach history, because I was primarily English and a little bit of science, is to tell the kids, people are not two-dimensional.
No.
That page is.
Yes.
But when you dig into people's stories a little bit, you find out that there's a whole lot more to us.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot more depth.
Mm-hmm. And certainly a lot more than Frank was ever given credit for.
Yes, yes.
So hope you enjoyed that little tale.
And speaking of strong men that support their women.
Aw, ain't you sweet.
Scotte wrote this wonderful piece coming up on the narrative, which will also be on Tales from the Heart of America, about a rather misogynistic, there's other words I could use.
He was a tire guy.
He was a tire guy.
That's the nicest thing you can say.
Yeah, pretty much. And dealing with me.
Which made him better.
So I have a quick question for you. What does America need more than anything else?
Love.
I'm going with that too.
Love right out there in the open for everybody to see.
I like that.
Because that's the point at which Americans are going to learn to understand one another again.
Yes, that's the only way we're going to be able to bridge those gaps.
Right.
The blue and red, the stereotypes.
Destroying the stereotypes. You know the last time a friend or family said or thought something and you went, I don't understand that.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah. But we didn't hate them. We wanted to know.
No, you start with, tell me.
Right. So we're going out across America to have America tell us, what is love? What does it mean? How do we find it with each other? And the best part about all this, you can help.
Awesome.
Go to our website, journeystolove.com, and click on the donate button. Help put Journeys to Love on the road and spread the love.
I like love.
Love is good. Motor Maids and Bubblegum, a tale from the heart of America. Today was one of those rare rides that is, sadly, necessary, efficient, and entirely unnoteworthy. In order to get back on time to the upper Midwest, we hauled from Cooperstown, New York to Cleveland between two remarkable halls of American fame, baseball and rock and roll, respectively. There's a different state of mind that settles in on those long interstate rides compared to the mountain, desert, or plains blue line highways, though. On the latter, a creative cast comes over your thoughts. In fact, I read an article recently speaking of the elements that nurture creativity. They included surrounding yourself with the colors of nature, being in open spaces, having time to think and reflect, and others that are naturally part of the cross-country riding experience. You can remember dreams more clearly, write songs and stories, even revisit conversations and memories with clarity in this frame of mind. On the interstate, especially in an urban passage with the dangers of high-speed traffic all around, thoughts become much more immediate, analytical, and focused. In both environments and frames of mind, Toni, my lovely and talented partner in life and on the road, is there flying wing in my right-hand mirror. We've ridden so many thousands of miles together by now that it's become something of a dance. She knows how I read traffic and road hazards, anticipates and moves with me in an unspoken rhythm that mirrors how we've lived life on legs as well. There's no one with whom I'd rather ride or whom I trust more. Which led my analytical interstate thoughts to my reaction over her recent encounter with a motorcycle mechanic in Connecticut. I get the boys' club concept when it comes to motorcycle clubs. Most of the clubs were formed in two waves, either after World War II or the Vietnam War, by men returning from those wars and alienated by the culture to which they were expected to return. Only their brothers in arms understood their experiences and their needs for that vital fraternal camaraderie to put it all in order without the judgments and expectations of civilian society. The traditional rules for the clubs were written from that fraternal perspective. I respect that. The freedom to be discriminating in our associations may not please today's politically correct commentators, but it remains one of the essential liberties nonetheless. I likewise have the freedom to associate with them or not based on those same rules, which is why I respectfully declined an offer to join an MC that would have required my partner to join in an auxiliary role and ride behind the men, some of whom don't ride as much in a year as she does in a week. It's entirely another thing, however, to let ignorant paternalistic judgments justify belittling the earned respect and accomplishments of women riders, as Toni experienced with this tire mechanic. Of course, she didn't give a rodent's posterior for his opinion one way or the other, blowing bubbles with her gum in the service area and her pigtails askew from the wind, but intentional ignorance is the worst kind, and his is keeping this fellow from realizing some of the richest parts of riding history. In 1916, sisters Augusta and Adeline Van Buren, hoping to earn posts as dispatch riders during World War I, became the first women to ride motorcycles coast to coast across North America. Starting in Brooklyn, New York, on Indian Power Plus motorcycles, They rode to Colorado Springs, Colorado, where they became the first women to summit Pikes Peak on any kind of motorized vehicle. They finished their 2-month, 3,300-mile trip in Los Angeles, California on September 8, 1916, wrenching, riding, and rebuilding their bikes themselves along the way in a time when there were few paved roads and no interstates. Their applications as post riders were rejected. At 19 years old, Bessie Stringfield, riding a 1928 Indian Scout, tossed a penny over a map to see where it landed. This method led her to riding solo through the entire lower 48 states, with all the dangers of being black, female, and on a bike alone at that time. In World War II, she became the first female civilian motorcycle dispatch rider, riding her own blue Harley and carrying classified documents between U.S. Army military bases. Stringfield went on to found the Iron Horse Motorcycle Club and won a flat track race disguised as a man, afterward being denied the trophy when she removed her helmet. Gloria Struck was born behind a motorcycle shop in Clifton, New Jersey in 1925 and started riding her first Indian Scout as a teenager in 1941. She joined the Motor Maids, one of America's first motorcycle clubs for women, in 1946, and took her first road trip to Daytona to watch the beach races there in 1951. In 2015, at the age of 90, she rode her 2004 Harley Heritage Softail Classic the 1,700 miles from home to the 75th annual Sturgis Motorcycle Rally and back. The bike is her 12th and has 49,000 miles on it. She probably has a few more to go and will be passing more than a few fellas trailering their spotless 1,500-mile Ultra CVOs behind their air-conditioned SUVs. My boisterous, colorful bride is in fine company among those ladies, putting more miles on her own blue suede 08 Heritage Softail in a summer than many tire mechanics and weekend townies will ride in a lifetime. This is the girl who, with a broken collarbone, laying against the concrete barrier after making unfortunate acquaintance with highway gravel on a mountain turn in Colorado, checked to make sure her tattoos were intact and asked the paramedic how long before she could ride again. Popping her gum and sometimes losing it to the wind at 80, purple scarf tattering behind her, there is no one I'd rather see next to me on the road, smiling and chasing the sun. So fellas, ride with who you want, but respect those who have earned it. And ladies, you go, girl.
So thanks for joining us this week for the Love in America podcast.
Love in America is produced by Scotte and Toni Burns in the Crooked Little House in Deadwood, South Dakota.
To learn more, visit our website, journeystolove.com.
Love in America and Tales from the Heart of America are distributed by PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.
And we are looking forward to sharing the love with you next time on
Love in America. Hey, there's more to that story.
There's always more to the story.